Hello, podcast listener. This is your host with the most, JJ from JJ Meets World. Today's episode, oh boy, strap in because we're going to talk about addiction counseling. We're going to talk about horses. We're going to talk about California. There's a lot we cover with our guests today. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called J.J. Meets World.
Gary, welcome to the JJ Meets World Studios. How you doing, buddy?
Thank you, JJ. It's good to be here.
So this is exciting for me because I got to meet you almost a year ago, but it was via Zoom, which is never the way you want to meet people. No. But you were part of a workshop reading we were doing for a radio play that eventually ended up on JJ Meets World, Last Exit for 20 Miles. And you got to you played the role of Santa Claus.
Yes.
How was that a hard role for you to play, to think of like, oh, I'm going to bring joy to millions of people and represent an entire holiday that technically is more pagan than Christian nowadays?
Right. And for me, it was more about just having the opportunity to do it and, being asked to do it in a time where, most people were just hunkered down, and being involved in workshops and things like that. And plays was just, it brought me out of my depression.
Oh, that's good.
Helped bring me out of my depression, which I had early COVID. It was really bad in California.
You and I think a lot of people realized, like, when they had to hit the stop button, that they had just sort of they've been pushing themselves so hard, and you got so many things. You got play dates, and I'm having dinner and that you don't really concentrate on your mental health. And then all of a sudden, when that was the only thing you concentrate on, I think a lot of people discovered, like, gosh, I suffer from depression, or, I think I might even be bipolar, I've been on a manic high for so long. And
you don't know. I mean, I think it caused a change of behavior around the world. And some people adjusted to it really well. Some people had a hard time, pulled themselves out of it. Like me, kind of, and some people went absolutely off the rails. They're still out there.
There were plenty of days when I was sitting with my wife, and she's like, "Well, should we watch something on TV, or should we do a puzzle?" And I thought to myself, I could never have been like a pirate, because
for a whole host of reasons.
Well, yeah.
But one of which is, there's no electricity.
The idea behind think of those folks who suffered from cabin fever because they were on a ship and they hadn't had a breeze in 7 days, and they are more or less just floating in the middle of the ocean, and there's nothing to do. And I would have gone completely and totally insane. Yeah, I would have been in the drink. I also just happened to watch Muppet Treasure Island, so that's why.
Oh, maybe that's
I'm
what
really
it is.
thinking. That's why I know the terminology, like the drink. Gary, let's start at the beginning. So, can you tell me a little bit about your background and how you end up where you are today?
All right. Well, I was born in Fargo, and I remember
St. Luke's.
Yeah, I think it was St. John's. I think
St. John's, sure, yeah.
Yeah, it was the older hospital, and I remember. It was also a hospital I had meningitis and rheumatic fever, and I had to spend 3 months in, when I was a kid. I got real sick. You're a kid, you don't know how sick you get, So I ended up, remember when I got here, I started having these memories about looking out the window at the snow and the Red River and just being alone, So I've had a kind of a solitary life. It's weird. Everybody in my family looked dark hair, dark eyes, and I had blonde curly hair and green eyes, so it was like different.
What did the milkman's hair look like?
Yeah, the milkman story was big, and then it got to the point to where I was like, we got to California, so just shit at the fan and everything, and it was like my parents, broke up, and my dad had done a whole lot of crap back here that he shouldn't have done, and he ended up going to prison for 12 years, and they caught him, and I remember that when we got to Oceanside, it was, kind of one of those things where it's like all of a sudden you got cops in your house, and, your door shuts and you're a kid and you don't know what's going on the other side of the door, except for it doesn't sound healthy, and so, I kind of remember when we moved from Moorhead, Fargo. I think we lived in Moorhead at the time. We went to Minneapolis for a couple of months, then California. But we left like overnight. It was like, we're moving. Really? Where and when? Because we always moved around town. In Fargo, Moorhead, you know how that goes. And he said, we're moving. And I said, well, where are we going now? And California. He didn't want, even running from the law.
So really, how old were you when you finally realized, like, oh, we were fleeing, we weren't moving?
It didn't take me too long after that. Maybe in the next 4 years, my mother remarried, and she liked to keep secrets, and then that facade type of mother that likes to present to the world that this is what's going on. Well, when we lived in this town, I remember what went on in my childhood was, there was drunkenness and fighting 6 days a week. And then we go to church on Sunday. Like everything's normal. Mom would dress us up and then just, the contrast didn't make sense to me, and, it wasn't just, they had, they didn't have like normal argument fight type things. Dad was usually very drunk, and mother had a weapon in her hand or a knife or something like that, and she was going to stab him. It was not a good thing to wake up to as a kid,
And you're not even talking about waking up in the morning. You're talking about waking up at 1, 2 in the morning.
Yeah. And
knowing you've got school the next day, but you're going to be tired.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a big commotion in the kitchen, and Dad's bleeding and Mom's holding a knife. And I'm like, what the hell?
Oh, brother, let me tell you something. So I come from a family with 2 alcoholic parents. So do I know what you're talking about?
Oh, my God.
And what's amazing is, like, there are more homes than people realize. Like, if you were lucky enough to have parents who were present and fully functional your entire childhood, you don't understand what a gift that is until you've had to deal with a world where, like, every day was sort of an unknown. And, like, I remember in my house on one of the biggest fights that my parents had, and they always went out and they played darts on Thursday at the local watering hole, which they were like, oh, well, we got to go out on Thursday because we got our dart league. And I'm like, well, you go to the bar every night. Like, why do you need to pretend like Thursday's something better? But they had like an epic row. And my dad was the drunk who wanted to say something sarcastic and like rude and mean. But my mom was the one who wanted to rage. And so I remember every plate in our house, every glass completely busted, shattered, every like piece of art, the glass punched out.
Yeah.
And like coming down the next morning and being like, what the hell am I going to do? Like, and just, like.
Or you exactly. Or you go, I wrote a song a while ago and I called it The Noise. And it was about that. It was about hearing the noise and do I want to go see what's going on down there? Do I really want to go down there and see what's going on? And it was weird as a kid because kids shouldn't have to make those kind of decisions, and that's just reality. And when we left the house, the rules were, like pretend you're normal.
Yep.
Pretend you're healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Pretend that we're healthy. Don't say anything bad. Don't tell the truth. And so, those were the rules.
How many siblings did you grow up with?
4. I have 2 left.
Okay. So there were 5 of you total or 4 of you total?
5 of us total.
Gotcha.
My brother my older brother and my older sister passed away.
So are you in the middle of the pack then? Of the
Towards
age-wise?
the end.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. But like I was alluding to before, there was times when they'd make fun of me and call me the milkman kid because I looked different. And then there were times when I felt grateful about that statement. Okay, maybe I'm not in this family, and let's just take a look at that. But, that's just how I felt at the time. It's just like.
So you end up in California, and you said, was it Oceanside? Oceanside.
Yeah.
I don't know why all of a sudden it reminds me of this, but have you ever seen the movie Follow That Bird? It's the Sesame Street Big Bird movie.
I have not seen
You'll
that
find
movie.
most of JJ's references are Muppet related.
Yeah.
I'm right.
But it's great because at one point, Big Bird gets adopted by this family of dodos, and he is sent to live in Ocean View, Illinois. And when I was like 26, I finally got that joke. I'm like, Ocean View, Illinois. You can't see the ocean from Illinois.
Right, right.
But you probably got to go to some place where you actually got to see the ocean on a regular basis.
I lived about a block away from the ocean as a kid, growing up. And that was always kind of cool, till you get sucked out in the riptide. And then that's how you find out that riptides occur, and they'll take you out about a mile sometimes.
Was your dad at all involved in like bank heists? Because that could remind JJ of Muppets Take Manhattan.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a jewelry heist, but thank you very much. And that was you're talking about the Great Muppet Caper. You're not talking about Muppets Take Manhattan is where they put on a show.
That's true. Did your dad ever put on a show?
He never put on a show.
Yeah.
So your dad gets arrested.
Yeah.
Do you see him after that, or is he a part of your life?
It's 12 years later. I look him up. He's doing a security guard job at a chemical plant in San Diego. It was really like a landfill. It was a weird place that he lived, a little trailer out in the middle of nowhere in San Diego by himself.
So you did a great job isolating himself.
Yeah, he did.
And what was it like to talk to him after that? I mean, because clearly you sought him out.
Right. Well, I wanted answers.
Yeah.
I needed some answers about things and family, and I needed some clarification. But the reality was, I'm not going to get it.
Yeah.
He was never an affectionate man. I sought to rekindle a relationship that had long died. And, I was growing up then, I was like 23, and I was drinking a lot, and he was always drinking. So it was like, we had that in common. That was our glue, I guess, in the relationship was I got a bottle, you got a bottle. And, that's what we'll do. And then he hung out for a couple of years and then died of lung cancer, so, and of course, it's like everybody, comes down to the hospital and acts like it's a normal family thing.
Right.
Going on here. No, it's not.
I always find that like death is the weirdest thing when it comes to forgiveness, because you when someone dies, you put them on a pedestal, right? And if someone's dying, even more so, where people can come like, oh, oh, Dad, gosh, I'll always remember you, and I'm gonna name my first kid after you, blah blah, and to be like, well, not everyone gets that, or not everyone deserves that kind of forgiveness, but I think it's important for the people who will go on living to process that in whatever way they want.
Yeah, and for me, it was about getting answers, getting clarity on some things, and understanding more about him, and why he thought the way that he did. And, he's a pathetic human being, but at the same time, it didn't stop me from wanting a father, and that sort of thing, or looking up to role models. And, when we moved to California, of course I attached myself to role models there, and kind of being the kid that could sneak out at night and nobody cares, and of course you find role models that aren't healthy,
Sure.
So, I got into, drugs and alcohol.
You're finding the other kids who can go out at night.
Yeah, I'm finding the other
no
kids
one
that go out
cares.
at night, and that's, you're exactly right.
I mean, like it's like these transitory families get built up over the fact that they don't have actual families that are functional at home. And so just like any other group of people, regardless of, why they get together, there's a common interest in that they have no place to go. They have no one to fend for them. And so you sort of feel, you start getting a camaraderie with people, and especially if that lifestyle is going to have stuff that's going to help the pain numb away.
Right.
For periods of time.
Sure.
That must just fuel it like crazy.
Well, I think it does. And you use the exact good observation. It's a transition. This family that I'm in, I don't want to be in right now. Mm-hmm. I want to be out of it, And so I'd go out with the other kids who wanted to get out of their families, and we, smoked pot, drank beer. And back in 1968, pot was considered as deadly as heroin. It's just
a little reefer madness.
Yeah, it was reefer madness. It was weird. So I get arrested at age 13 for possession of pot in Huntington Beach, and I end up having to do a 3-month stint with the California Youth Authority, changing irrigation pipes 6 days a week, 10 hours a day.
Oh my God!
For 3 months, I did that.
Damn.
So now I'm going into high school, and I'm thinking, I can't keep on that path. I just didn't want to go down that road. If this is what it was, I mean, I spent time in a cell as a kid, and back then, they hit you with sticks. They did all kinds of stuff, guards, and things like that. And then they threw an 18-year-old kid in a cell with me and my buddy who got busted with us, and he'd eaten like 25 hits of acid. He was just out of his mind, and he started, hitting us, and we were kids, it's like, so we ended up fighting with this guy, and I ended up, I think I had my thumbs in his eyes to make him stop hitting me. And the guy was drilling on the front panel and the door, and the door, all the doors on the hallway just went and opened up. And we flew into the hall, and, they got rid of him. He was psych after that. But, it's like stuff like that happened. That shouldn't happen.
So how are you not 6 feet under at this point? Because by age 13, it sounds like you had already lived more life than a lot of people had.
Well, I'm here by the grace of God. I could tell you that.
Yeah. I
believe that. I don't diminish that. Not one bit. I think I've done things that, I wasn't trying to kill myself. They have a term called passive suicide, where you just don't care, and I got in kind of that way for a while. But when I got back out of the penal system, if you will, first day of high school, I was telling Kevin that, Kennedy, that there was a food fight first day of high school. I got hit in the side of the head with a banana. I picked it up and threw it back just as the vice principal walked right in my path.
Oh.
And hit him right in the side of the head. So naturally I have a meeting with the principal and my probation officer at the same time. And they're going, dude, we're going to give you 2 more years probation. I was like, come on.
For the banana?
For the banana.
I mean, you did how much time for a substance now that in most states you could just buy and then put into your car? And I'm not talking about bananas.
No, I know.
That's just, man.
Well, it's just sad it took them that long to realize, but, people have been doing that for years, with some of the propaganda with first of all, I'm a drug and alcohol counselor now. I've been a counselor for 35 years. But when I look back on it, I think I got into it because I, ended up going to treatment for it. And I thought, well, this is really the first thing I ever really wanted to do. Excuse me, was be a counselor, help people and do stuff like that. I thought it was the first thing I really had a desire to do. Like, I really want to do this. I really want to do that. So I went back to college at age 33 and did all that stuff. And I've been married 3 times. I've got 2 kids. They're great. They're great kids. They're wonderful kids. I I know one of them is struggling with addiction right now. And, you know, he knows the rules. You know, I'm there for you if you need me. I'm not there for you if you don't need me. You know, and I won't be there for you to use me, you know, anymore. So, you know, it's taken years to get to that point, but you do, you know.
Okay, so let's jump into like, you know, your decades of drug and alcohol counseling, because boy, oh boy, I think for a long time we shuffled like addiction under the mat.
Yeah.
And we didn't want to acknowledge it as a society. We certainly didn't want to acknowledge it within families, and things just kind of, you know, it's like, oh, that's Aunt Carl and or Uncle Carl and Uncle Carl. We just don't talk to Uncle Carl after 4:00 in the afternoon.
Right.
If he ever comes over here, just don't let him in the house. And, you know, those little aspects. But I think we're getting to a place of where we're really understanding. I mean, certainly mental health is being taken more seriously than it ever has before. And so in the world of drug and alcohol counseling, I mean, is it nice to see that most employers have a policy in place for this, you know, where you're not going to lose a job if you go into inpatient. Insurance companies are taking it seriously. I mean, it seems like
they're taking it more seriously, but not as seriously as they should.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So
not
like
as seriously as they should. The percentage, I tell the people that are in treatment, you are part of 14% of the nation. And you are 0.5% of that 14%. You're pretty lucky to be in treatment. That other 13.9% or whatever is out there, you know, and doing what they're doing, you know. So I tell people in treatment, you know, you're in a very small population right now.
Did you work inpatient, outpatient?
I worked inpatient, outpatient. I did a 3-year stint at psych hospital. When I was on a special ward, they actually brought up a psych special unit for adult children of alcoholics.
Oh,
believe it or not, that got traumatized as children because, you know, they were getting ignored. And the lady that wrote the book on it became my boss, Claudia Black. She was amazing.
Okay, what's the name of her book?
It Can Happen to Me.
Yeah, I've read that book.
Can't Happen to Me.
I've read that book.
Yes.
Yep.
She was my boss.
Really?
Yeah, she was my boss. And she was sharp as a tack. She still is, you know.
And even that, like, we're acknowledging the fact that, like, addiction affects more than just the addict themselves.
Yes. Everybody in the family system, everybody who's close to that person catches what they have in some form or fashion. You know, they're going to be reactive to that person. Like you said, don't talk to Uncle Denny unless he's had 2 drinks, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's how people adjust to the disease of alcoholism and drug addiction. They adjust to it.
Has it been so? In the amount of time that you've been working in the system, drugs have changed pretty drastically too. You know,
Yep.
When I think of like someone who is working in drug counseling in the 60s, you had just a very small amount of chemical based drugs that were going around.
Yes.
You know, and then a lot of marijuana. But
LSD
nowadays,
was popular.
oh my God, like, good Lord, it seems like they're making drugs out of everything nowadays.
Yeah. And there'll be more. As long as they can synthesize something, they will.
Yeah.
And now fentanyl's, you know, ruling America.
Ugh.
You know, and there's a lot of theories about how that could happen, you know, but and some are really dark theories. They're really dark theories, you know, because it's so deadly. You know, there was a sheriff's deputy that found some, just opened the trunk and passed out and OD'd from just opening the trunk.
Really?
Just said, and the other deputy said, get away from that. And he went down. And they saved him. They gave him Narcan and stuff, but that's how powerful it is. And it's going to be everywhere if it isn't already, you know, because it's very concealable, you know, it's very deadly. And that's the hard part is people don't know how to I don't know how to say this. It's without sounding ridiculous, but they don't know how to introduce something into that drug world that's safe.
Sure.
Everything gets more dangerous as you go along.
Sure.
And excuse me, and concealable.
So what is it about fentanyl that makes it such an attractive drug to a user?
It's one of those things where as soon as they started, excuse me, when they started changing, heroin was the first synthesized drug. They took the opium poppy and they synthesized it and changed the chemical structure in it just a little bit, so that it would become even more addicting. And then that's exactly what they did. And that's why the drug companies are getting sued right now, because they're finding out that these people had plans to do this, and they thought, okay, well, we'll introduce these powerful opiates out on the market, and they know that they were competing with heroin. Probably get a phone call, but they know they were competing with heroin. They know that they wanted a part of that market.
Mm-hmm.
So they introduced OxyContin, and then, fentanyl was around. They used it in extreme pain cases, and if you were dying of some horrible disease, then fentanyl was like, hey, here you go. But now it's on the recreational list, which is ridiculous. Because it's deadly. We lose people. We lost a kid a couple months ago. A great kid, had everything going for him. Just a regular American kid, 22 years old. And that upset everybody. Which it's going to do. But it happens from time to time where you lose people.
Okay, so I'm just gonna be jumping around everywhere. So just. But bear with me, Gary.
Yeah, forgive me. I'm
like the movie
long-winded.
Muppets in Space.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but a lot of different ideas coming into one. Okay, so like the Betty Ford Clinic, right? So is the Betty Ford Clinic still as highly regarded as it was like in the late 80s, early 90s? Because it seemed like that was the idea of like, yep, we're gonna take this seriously and we're gonna get the best of the best.
Well, yeah, everybody says that. Everybody does that, and they had a great program at the time. I think it's been sold several times, to be honest with you, to different owners, and some not so good. Some not so good.
Okay, so let me ask you this then. Are people seeing that there is money to be made in addiction counseling?
Not in addiction counseling.
Okay.
But in like executive ownership, things like that. Yes, there's money to be made. Lots of money. But there's people that I don't know what they cook their books. They do a lot of things, and it's probably one of the most uninvestigated industries also. It's like, it's like they don't care that much.
Well, it's like the Girl Scouts, right? Like, oh, they're doing good. And sometimes in the veil of doing good, you find out like, oh, this person, this insurance company paid out $6 million, in treatment to this one facility for one patient for 1 month. And it seems to me like, and I'm not saying that I don't know. That's why I asked the question, but it does seem to me like there's a lot of money to be made. The number of books out there that people can buy right now, the number of things, that people, the number of things that you can be a consumer, an addict consumer for, really, it kind of makes you like raise an eyebrow a little bit when you look at it.
Sit up and think, and I see commercials for like, I can't say the facility's name, but I'll see a commercial for a facility in Malibu, let's say, and I used to work at that facility. I did equine therapy at that facility for their clients. I know the owner. He's a dick. He's a fucking dick. Who just wants money and wants to make a living at it, and could care less about the clientele.
Just as long as the check clears.
Just as long as the check clears and all that stuff. And I've met other people, other owners who just really care. You can't pay people for caring. They either do or they don't, and that's what I tell. And we care about our clients where I work, and, It's nice. It's a great place to work.
My mom went through several treatment facilities, like inpatient treatment facilities over the years. And so one of them highly regarded in Minnesota. She went there twice. And we went down to Phoenix to someplace. And the thing that...
And all of those.
Yeah, the thing that got me when I was a kid was I haven't stayed at resorts that are this nice when I walk into some of those facilities. And it's funny because the thing that really got my mom to change her attitude was when she was leaving one of these facilities, one of her counselors said, "You shouldn't go home. You're not ready for home. You're ready to be out of here, but you're not ready to go home. So I think you should go and live in a halfway house for a while." And my mom was a very well-to-do, her grandfather was the mayor of Fargo at one point, very successful family. And so it just goes to show that addiction doesn't care who you are or what you are, it'll take you. And she spent 4 months living in a halfway house in Duluth. And what she told me was, she goes, that was the great equalizer, because she was with people who were court ordered to be there, who, if they didn't fulfill their time, weren't going to be able to see their kids, weren't going to be able to do all this stuff. And she goes, that's when I realized, like, oh, I'm not special. And I am part of a much bigger process that's going on, that people, like you said, you're in a grocery store, and guess what? 7 of the 8 people in that grocery store have all had to deal with addiction in one way or another, but you wouldn't know it because you're all fighting over the same loaf of wheat bread.
Exactly.
And so I think
but some of that wheat bread, has a shitload of money.
Yep.
And the other part of that wheat bread has nothing.
Right. And that's what I think she experienced in that halfway house, where the people who, the have-nots, if you will. And I think that really woke her up quite a bit. I mean, she still struggled for a long time. I mean, well, any true addict will tell you, you struggle every day. You like silently, some days are easier than others, but you're never cured.
No, you're in remission. That's the way I look at it. You're in remission one day at a time. That's what we get. It's kind of a collective thought recovery and some of the 12-step programs. It's a collective thought.
Are you amazed at how big like programs like NA and AA have grown over the years?
They've grown because of treatment.
Right.
And treatment, it's kind of weird because treatment can't be, it's more behavioral related. And AA is kind of like the transitional piece that's going to carry you forward, or NA is going to carry you forward. There's different meetings. There's different types of meetings. There's different programs like NA and AA. NA is actually bigger in Riverside County than AA. In Orange County, it's like AA's 10-1 NA, but NA in Riverside County is huge. So it's like, it's different.
Well, in my small frame of reference for when it comes to AA, I also know you can walk into any meeting in America, but you really need to find your tribe. The people who have success in AA find a group of people who can be a good, solid foundation, and not every group is going to be that to everybody.
Right. But my my thoughts on that is that we try to create that venue in treatment where, they help each other. That's my deal, is I want them to learn how to help each other right now, because that's how it started. You didn't have anybody helping anybody, until somebody helped one guy, another guy helped that guy. And when they had alcoholic number 3, it was off and running, and it had a life of its own. But, I don't know where I'm going with this, but I guess I was just trying to say there's so many different meetings and different, but you hit the nail on the head. I remember now, I tell people, you go where the love is and you stay in the middle of it, and you stay in the middle of that herd. You be a herd animal, that's why horses, they protect each other,
Okay, so let's go back. You just casually mentioned that you were working with equine therapy. So that's pretty awesome. Can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe somebody out there has never even heard about it.
It's a different kind of therapy where you use the characteristics of a horse, to help people. Horses and man and women have had a relationship for a very long time. They know who we are. They know what we do, and they know how we do it. And they're very intuitive to a degree to sense things about. They're a prey animal, so they're part of the animals that get eaten by other animals. That's part of how that works. So their defense is speed, running, and kicking if they need to. That's their defense. But knowing that they're prey animals, they're hypersensitive. They can see almost 360 degrees around them. It's like that big cinema thing you saw at Disneyland.
Mm-hmm.
They can do that anyway. They have two little spots right in front, one in the back that they can't see. So they see differently than we do. But they're very sensitive, and they can sense things wrong with people. They can actually sense like what's wrong with people.
Wow.
And so I used them, to just really observe. And I've had clients do things that are so amazing with the horses and courageous. I give them credit, because it's hard work.
There's something about animals that are domesticated, like that, and I'm going to take like cows and stuff off for this, the ones that we eat, but like ones that we interact with, that we have friendships and familyships with. Horses, dogs, cats. It's I don't know how to describe it necessarily, except that you're right, that they can sense changes in you, but they can do that while remaining completely non-judgmental.
Yes.
Because they're not viewing you in the way a human does. They don't have all those heuristics and those previous conceptions about stuff. And to them, whether or not you're addicted to cocaine or caffeine or Twizzlers, like it doesn't. They don't care about that.
Right.
Especially if they have a relationship with you, and then suddenly they realize that your mood has shifted, they care about that.
Right.
And
they'll know.
They'll know.
I used to have a horse named Lucy, and she wasn't an equine therapy horse. There's some horses that are really good at it, and there are other horses you just don't want them near a client. They're just dangerous. Or she's green, and she used to sit. And I remember it raining in Malibu, and it was like the El Nino year where it rained like just mudslides, everything, and I went out to go put a blanket on her, so I drive down the branch, go, Lucy, where are you? And she's in the middle of the herd in a corner. And she was like the queen of that paddock with all those horses. Like she ruled them, She came over and I put a blanket on her and they all took her back. And it was just, but it was fun. But I got to work with, all different kinds of populations, from off the streets to, baseball players, movie stars, things like that. Their problems are bigger because everything in their life is bigger, and that's something I found out about is that their problems are bigger than mine, So.
I mean, often, obviously, the addiction itself can be something that can kill you. It's got chemical hooks and things like that. But oftentimes, my assumption is that once you're at the addiction phase, that's because there are prior traumas to that led you to that, and that the addiction itself is sort of an outcome of these other traumas that you can't just treat the addiction without also somehow dealing with those, because they can just lead you back into the same numbing cycle.
Well, they're getting smarter.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, and people don't understand that addiction treatment is very young when you consider how long addiction's been around. It's been around for centuries. Every town had a drunk in the westerns. It was like, kind of like that. But it's evolved now where they're looking into the behaviors, the upbringing, everything. They're looking at everything in a person's life now, before they convict them of whatever it is, which is amazing to actually consider that stuff, and I'm a bit of an activist too.
Is it weird how we used to kind of, in a way, like when you talk about Westerns, like glorify the addict You know, like it was like Lee Marvin built his whole career playing drunks all the time.
Yeah.
And we didn't call them addicts, right? We called them drunks
Right.
and stuff like that. And it was like, oh, the tortured soul of the gunslinger who, was remorseful. Even like in Blazing Saddles, like Gene Wilder's character, is
shoot with his hand.
Right. And how far we've come just in acknowledging like those, the fact that like, well, this isn't something that should be glorified. It shouldn't be hidden. It shouldn't be kept in the shadows, but it shouldn't be glorified for comedic sake. Even what was, Buddy Ebsen played Davy Crockett's like right-hand man, and he was, the dirty, oven hungover, working off of a stupor type thing. And that was a Disney series.
Yep.
And he was one of people's favorite characters because he was so endearing. Yes. He was so wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bizarre stuff.
That's how they portrayed him, and, alcohol is just the oldest drug in the world. That's all. I imagine there was cavemen seeing squirrels eat these weird grapes and flop around, look like they're having fun. So they thought they'd try it,
Gosh, I really hope that is how it started. Like,
oldest drug in the world.
Let me tell you a joke that maybe you'll appreciate just from, because sometimes you just gotta laugh at them, right? You gotta laugh at the situation you're in.
Absolutely.
There's an amazing comedian named Mitch Hedberg who toured around, and unfortunately he died. He dealt with addiction himself, but he does these quick little setup and punchline jokes. And he goes, the other day I was walking down the street and I saw a wino eating grapes, and I was like, hey man, you gotta wait. And I remember laughing really hard at that joke, thinking like, sometimes humor is how I use, it's the best medicine I've ever had to like.
And it is good medicine.
It is, right?
I tell my clients there's 3 things that are going to bring back your endogenous morphine. And one of them is physical exercise. The other one is laughter. And the other one is crying. And sex, but I don't tell them that in treatment.
So, for you, that's basically just crying. Yeah. You used a phrase just now that I wanted to ask you about. You said endogenous morphine?
Yeah, endorphins.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that a little bit?
What
you're talking about there?
Especially for opiate addicts, when they use, whatever synthetic opiate there is or whatever deal there is, and even for alcoholics, when they start putting the chemical in, and addiction is not mental, it's physical. Mm-hmm. Addiction is physical. When you're physically addicted, when you've got to have that to feel normal, when you've got to make sure that you get enough in that to where you could go function that day, that's addiction. But it's also an invisible line people cross, and they don't know they crossed it. It doesn't give them a warning saying, hey, guess what? Do that again, you're going to be addicted. Doesn't say that. Right. They're going to do it again and get addicted physically. And then when they withdraw, they have nothing up here. That's why withdrawal is so painful. People don't get how painful withdrawal is. I've done it. It's painful. I know I'm not going to die or blow up. That's the only thing I know when I'm withdrawing. So it's like one of those things where, just leave me alone for 4 or 5 days, give me a case of water and I'll be okay. But that's the tough part. It's like I've been able to do that in the past. There are people who can't do that. They don't want to go through the pain of it. That's why, people go, well, why aren't you in jail for that? They don't keep them in jail long enough to where they can detox. Right. They let them go right the next day and they're going out. Right. But it's tough all over, and different drugs do different things. If someone takes benzodiazepines and gets addicted to Xanax or Valium, those types of drugs, that's a physical addiction, but it also really affects the brain. So when these guys come in, they got nothing up here, nothing to really give them any type of comfort. And I tell them laughter, tears, and exercise. Make sure you do those things while you're here,
So effectively natural highs in some respect, that because, the mental state you're chasing with the drug, like, I don't like how I feel right now. I want the immediate whatever that drug gives me.
Right, the gratification.
And it sounds to me like I'm hearing you say that while going through this journey, you also have to cultivate positive mental states that don't require that switch, that automatic thing that you can actually attain these things.
It's it's kind of like, it's pretty depressing when someone tells you, you're going to have this the rest of your life on a daily basis.
Right.
You don't got any good news?
Right.
It's like, got any reason for living? I mean, come on.
I mean, there's ice cream in the cafeteria today, but beyond that, yeah.
But it's like people have developed their own, I don't know, their own system, I guess, if you will. And they have a lot of the males have and females have a perceived need for external stimuli constantly. They think that I've got to feel this way all the time,
right.
And they're chasing something. That's just what happens.
So let's take a hard left here. So you also said that you wrote a song. So you're a musician as well?
I was a musician for many years. I'm still a musician, I guess you could say. But
I was gonna say you're a musician every single day.
That's right.
Every single day.
Yeah.
So what did you play, or what do you play?
I play guitar, acoustic and electric, and I sing and I write songs. So, the idea was to write songs and see how far it would take me, do that sort of thing. So I played around in Hollywood for a while. It was kind of nice. I had a trailer in Malibu where it was a 24-foot trailer, and I stripped it out and turned it into a little studio that I could sleep in and record in, and I paid my rent by taking care of 2 horses, so that was it. Just clean up after the horses, make sure they're fed. Okay.
It's a very Prince-like story you got going on there.
It's pretty weird,
I mean, his Paisley Park's just a little bit bigger than a trailer, but
Yeah. Yeah, I was so sad about that. I really was.
Mm-hmm.
Still am.
I just toured
That's
Paisley Park. Yeah, exactly. The other day, and they talked about, this was a guy who was an absolute genius. And again, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you are. That, that abuse of drugs can claim anyone at any time.
Yes, there's, it's not like some of those drugs, especially fentanyl, is addicting very quickly. It's a term called tachyphylaxis or something like that, but it's called rapid onset of addiction. That's like you can get physically addicted, overnight on fentanyl.
Just the chemical hooks are just that strong. They're just boom right
it's
in
like,
there.
If I can feel this good all the time,
right?
And then you end up, dead. That's the sad part.
Yeah,
I didn't even know you died.
I've never tried hard drugs, and I've never been super curious about it because of the things I've seen in the popular culture from celebrities who have gone to, like Artie Lang would be one who, and I'm surprised he's still alive right now. I mean, his nose is caved in, all these other things that he's been going on with, but he had an appearance once on Conan O'Brien, I think. Mm-hmm. And he was in the midst of some kind of bender or something. And he was talking about going to recovery, and one of the people that he would see routinely was like not a physical therapist, but like a gym coach almost, or what am I trying to say? A personal trainer. That's what I'm trying to say, for to try to get him just physically active and stuff. And Artie Lang's telling the story, and the trainer is saying to him, like, hey man, no matter what you're going through, what I'm going to get you to do is it's going to feel better than heroin. And Artie Lang said, have you ever tried heroin? I don't think you have. And that was the thing that scared me. It was like, wow, this guy is basically saying, I know what you're saying is going to be good. Like what you're saying, I'll feel good, but trust me, you've never danced with this dragon.
Yeah.
And it is not just, oh, I feel good. It's something deeper than that.
Well, that was a perfect comeback for him. Have you ever tried heroin?
Right.
Because the reality of it is the guy's making a claim that's not true.
Right.
Most people, I mean, I'll give you one example. It was weird. When I was working at the psych hospital, I'm driving home, and there's a guy laying in the middle of the street. He's holding a rose like this. It looks dead.
Looks like he's in a coffin.
And he's laying there in the middle of the street. So I stopped my car and I thought, this is weird. I'm working at a psych hospital and I'm still working. And I drag him over to the curb. He's like passed out, he's ODing. You can tell his lips are blue. And so I called the paramedics. The paramedics come over and and the guy's about to give him some Narcan. And I said, you going to put a spit shield on him? He goes, just let me do my job. And I said, okay. Stood back and he jams this guy with Narcan. The guy just sits up and just breaks the paramedic's nose.
Wow.
For ruining his high.
Oh, wow.
For ruining his high. And he looked at me, the paramedic, and I went, don't look at me. I don't know.
Right.
Oh, snap. Do you think having like a personal background and having danced with these demons yourself in a lot of ways makes you a better counselor for what you do? Or is it simply you need to be an empathetic human being?
Yeah, I don't stake that claim. There are other people that do. I have seen therapists and counselors and case managers who are not addicted to anything and never were, but they were great with their clients, because they cared about their clients, and you're right. It's more the empathy thing than it is the, I could relate thing. Now I can smell bullshit a mile away. Sometimes, it's like, I'll have guys hide behind people in groups, so that they don't get called on to talk, and it's like, I know you're there, Tony, stick your head out, and it's funny.
And you hit on something, which is, so Hollywood does its best work when it tries to, understand addiction. And it is the most cliched, overwrought crap that they put out. And it's always about the group circle. And it's always a counselor being like, Tina, we haven't heard from you in a while. Yeah. And, stuff like that. Like, do you want to share? And it's like, I don't need to talk with this group. And then it turns out that that's the 360. Is there a piece of media, whether it's television, music, movies, whatever, that you feel actually nailed what it's like to be in that sort of business of human beings?
It's a very, you got what they call the industry. I guess they call it out there. Are you in the industry? Everybody kind of does that. Are you in the, it's kind of a weird thing. I think it's a butt sniffing thing myself, but it's just,
I think you're right. You're right. It sounds just like
the
that.
industry. That's what they do. But there's a lot more. It's an industry, and these people get paid exorbitant amounts of money. And their accessibility to drugs and alcohol and women and whatever that is 10 times more than say Kevin 20 times.
Yeah. I agree. Yep. maybe Tucker, maybe 4 times, but
yeah, that's right. That's right.
But there's that accessibility piece where they even get like instead of going to a recovery home, they'll have the recovery home come to them. In other words, they'll hire a sober coach.
Sure.
I'm going to just shadow your ass for 3 months straight. And they'll do that while someone's doing a shoot somewhere just to babysit them, and spend all that time, with them so that they don't get drunk or, the movie has a lot of, industry has a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes all that money is based on one person.
I was just reading about John Belushi's sober coach, and was this, rough and tumble mountain man that they had hired who had also like shadowed a bunch of other people. And they talk about like this person instantly becomes a member of your family because they're opening your bedroom door and being like, you brush your teeth tonight? Okay. Don't close this door again.
Right.
And like in John Belushi's case, like his wife Judith was there the whole time, but she goes like, I couldn't keep an eye on him nonstop, but somehow this dude had like an instinct that if John was sneaking out the back door, this guy would be sitting on his porch being like, hey, where are we going? And not like, where are you going? Where are we going?
Right.
Together. And I find that to be an amazing thing, but it just doesn't work for everyone. Like,
no,
you know?
and there's so many factors. There's the accessibility factor, the money factor. I've got this, I've got that, I've got connections. I've got Billy who can get me the girls. I got he can get me, drugs, whatever. Cocaine, was huge back then. I think he was mixing cocaine and heroin, and back then they called those speedballs.
Mm-hmm.
Now the roller coasters, because you kind of go up and down and that sort of thing. But there's combinations of drugs people use too. And I've always believed that people are trying to treat something. They're trying to fix something that's been wrong forever, and that's one of the reasons why I do what I do. Is like, you're not going to fix it. I take my grocery cart by the liquor aisle, and I say out loud, you're not going to fix anything. Keep going, because it's true. You're not going to fix anything, That's just my mantra, one of my mantras.
I always tell people that I have just as much fun sober as you do drunk. So I'll save my money.
And that's a good thing. I also I can hang out with drunk people and not do grief about it.
Right.
It's like you just have a good time, but there are other people that, I guess in early sobriety, you don't want to test yourself too much. You'll be tested enough. Just waking up in the morning.
As a child of an addict, I can see it in myself. So like when I never had a period where I would call myself a drinker, but I certainly had my 20s, and that when that was our social activity, was like going out. And my problem was, once I would start, I didn't stop.
Yeah.
And so, like I was a binge drinker.
Yeah.
I'd do this. I had this little move when a waitress would come to the table, and I'd be like, okay. And I'd count and be like, okay, there's 6 of us here. Oh, could I get 6 Washington apples? And she'd bring 6 shots over, and I'd take all 6 of them. Right. But I'd pretend like I was buying around for the table so it wouldn't look, and they'd have no reason to cut me off. And because if I showed up, I was like, oh, well, if we're out drinking, I should be drunk. Like, let's get this ball rolling.
That was always my deal too. It's like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this to the hilt.
Right.
And
pop the bottle out, or the cap off the top of the jack, and just chug a lug.
It never made sense for me to get a little drunk.
Right. No one wants to be buzzed.
It was like, no, I'd rather be plastered. But that's part of the problem with alcoholism, drug addiction too, is there's never enough, of what you think you need, your perceived need. And that's something that I talk about a lot with people, is like, what is the perceived need? What are you trying to fix? What are you trying to medicate?
Mm-hmm.
You'll hear all kinds of, well, my wife's a bitch. You're lucky you still have one. I tell them the truth. You're lucky you still have one, And I work with families too, I've always believed that, true alcoholics have a full glass of whatever it is, the family, the job, and then the drinking and using, or whatever it is. I've always believed and even when they get sober, they got to fill that part up with something else. You got to,
Well, it sounds like addiction is something that is very easy to pass along to the next generation.
Yeah.
As well. That if your parents dealt with it, and you've dealt with it, and your children have dealt with it, and if they have children, that they may also deal with it. So there's these cycles that end up like ruling certain families. It's like, I come from a long line of stonemasons. Well, I come from a long line of alcoholics, is like a common Scots-Irish joke, right?
Right.
But that's true, right? That's actually real, and those are cycles that we need to try to stop.
Yeah, I agree. Look, if you ever watch, don't plug anybody, but the history of this country was built on drugs and alcohol. It was built.
Right.
Alcohol led the way. That's a thing. They didn't have any distillation.
Does that industry ever hurt? Even in, did the alcohol industry, for the most part, get hurt during COVID, or did it
boomed?
It boomed. I would assume. That's what I would assume. I didn't know the numbers.
Delivery. People were getting delivered to their house.
I mean, basically, it certainly feels like every time I open the forum and I find out there's a new business opening up, it's that plus a tap room.
Yeah.
Because they're going, well, we know that the thing that will sell will be the booze.
Right.
So if I want to, I think there's like a dog park and tap room or something.
Yeah, it's called like Fetch and Brew or something like that.
Something like that. So it's basically, let's take this one thing that we are guaranteed to make money off of, just about guaranteed to make money off of, except there's so many people making money off it in this town that now you're just competing for all those people.
Yes.
But then they're really going, the thing I really want to do is something that probably isn't sustainable on its own. So I'm going to attach booze to it.
Okay, so Tucker, I think you make an excellent point, because just on my way to this recording, there's a farmer's market taking place in downtown Fargo. But also within this farmer's market, there's like 4 breweries who are slinging drinks at 10 a.m.
Right.
And when we had our annual street fair, there were, it was like, good news, you can now carry your booze and like mixed cocktails and everywhere. And I think, why do we all have to be Las Vegas? Why does alcohol have to be the contributing factor to get you somewhere? You can't just have a chili feed. It's a wine and chili feed. You can't just do this. It's like, oh, we're going to have great drinks available.
And for 85% of the population, it's not a problem. They can walk down the street, have their 3/4 of a beer, and then leave the rest. Which
it's
totally disgusts me, but anyway.
Right. It is such a light, though, on our hypocrisy, right? Because if we've embraced these things, I'm talking our hypocrisy as a culture, we've embraced these things, and yet we're going to shun and hide away those who these things that we've embraced are helping ruin their lives. And we're going to go, yep, we love, drugs and alcohol culturally. It's fun party time. We're going to embrace it wholeheartedly. Unless your life gets ruined by it, then we're going to just pretend you don't exist.
Right. And that's exactly right. Prior to COVID and the shutdowns and the lockdowns and all that stuff, prior to that, a lot of attention was on overdoses in America, and I don't know the statistics because I haven't checked them, but I'm willing to bet that just as many people died of overdoses as COVID. But it's a different, it's looked upon differently by our society. Mm-hmm. It's like you're part of that lower 15% that can't handle whatever it is that you can't handle, and then shame on you. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to shame an alcoholic or an addict. They got plenty themselves. They got plenty to spare. And I tell them that's denial. That's saying I suffer from assholism, not alcoholism. And I tell them you got to reframe that shame, and put it into, I'm going to be accountable from here on out. Because I ask them when they're in treatment, how long have you been here? 35 days. Well, have you done any of that shit in 35 days? No. Well, guess what? That's what sobriety does. You don't have to do all that shit that you did before. Because it's a 24/7 job being an alcoholic and an addict or an addict. It's 24/7.
Do you believe in like the rock bottom theory of a true addict needs to find their rock bottom before they, can look up again?
I do. I really do. The sad part about it with alcoholics and addicts is that they will lose everything except for a means to get whatever it is at the end. It's usually their job or whatever. They'll lose a family first. They'll lose things first. I've had people, trade their families in for alcoholism. I did that with my first marriage, and that those are hard things to swallow, throughout the years even, and thank God, it's one of those things where she remarried, had 2 more kids. They're not alcoholic. Mine are, but that's it's like it's intergenerational. And they say, people they pull a lot of like, the misinformation shit that goes around. People will pull out something because it's cliche and it sounds good. It isn't helping anybody, and I get sick and tired of that. I really do, because there's like I said, that 22-year-old kid, could have been president of the United States someday. He was that smart. He was that brilliant. He had that much charisma and characteristics. He was a great kid, but he had an addiction, and it killed him. And he doesn't get to live out the rest of his life. And I have over the years probably, I don't know, I've probably seen about 100 people, just like him in 35 years, just same thing, get out of treatment. I even had one kid tell me in treatment one time, he said, when I'm going to get out of here, I'm going to commit suicide. And I said, what do you mean? He says, I'm going to overdose myself when I get out of here. And so, his father overdosed himself and died of suicide. And I'm sitting there looking at this kid. He's like 19, 20 years old. And I'm going, but you got your whole life ahead of you. He goes, not on this planet I own. That's how he felt, and brought his mother in. We did every intervention possible. Antidepressants, things like whatever. He said, that's not it. And the kid was brilliant. He said, that's not it. He said, I just don't want to be here. And 2 months later, after he left treatment, he did it. Mom called me, and I said, well, at least he told us he was going to do it. He told us what the deal was. He didn't want to be here on this planet without heroin.
That's, yeah, wow.
It's amazing because like most of the time with an addict, follow through is not their number one priority.
No.
But in this situation, and
it's an extraordinary situation.
I think you bring up something too, which is the fact that like you can say all the right things, you can pray, you can do everything as someone who loves this individual. But you need to understand that it's their journey, not yours.
Absolutely.
And it took me a long time to figure that out with my mom. I was like, well, doesn't she love my sister and I enough to like get this thing under control? And like, doesn't she understand that she's like a joke to, everyone else on the block? Doesn't she understand this? And I realized like, well, that's her journey. Like it's got to work for her. This has nothing to do with me. It's not my fault that she's drinking. And man alive, like those things came in all honesty, those things came too late in my relationship with my mom.
Which is what happens.
Which 100%. Right. And I've come to grips with that. And, she ended up passing away because of a brain aneurysm. And luckily we had like a solid 6 years. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to concentrate on the other 30 crap ones. I'm going to only concentrate on these good ones.
And that was her process. That was her life, and you're right. I tell everybody, we'll get one. Like I got a guy, I tell people, I give them my phone number. Tell all the clients, you call me when you get safe, and they don't. They don't call you. One called me, he's in trouble. And, I said, are you all right? And texting, and he's like, yeah, I just had a bad couple of days. Things are fine. Next thing I know, he should be checking back into the center. And I always tell him, I always know what's going on. Just come back. Give yourself some more time. That's the thing about the disease of addiction and alcoholism is it takes years to manifest itself in most people. Drugs, a little bit faster because they're synthesized. But alcohol and beer, it'll manifest over the years, and then people will adjust to it, so to speak, and they'll rationalize it in millions of ways. As long as I'm providing for my family, I can do what I want, and
quote unquote functional alcoholic.
Yeah, well, they're 5 different types. I can't tell you exactly the characteristics of all of them, but they have different characteristics. They're alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and epsilon alcoholics. And they all have different characteristics. Some are binge drinkers. So 6 months go by, they haven't had a drink. They don't need a drink. They don't want to drink. But when they do drink, then they'll go for a couple of weeks, at a time, and then they peel it back and wait another 6 months and do it again. And there's different types of alcoholics. There's the alcoholic that works 9 to 5 every day and then comes home and drinks 5 to 10 and passes out every day.
This is making me think, and I apologize. My current frame of reference for almost everything is Simpsons at the moment. I'm going through a big Simpsons kick. And while it's so Barney Gumble, who's like Homer's best friend at the bar, who's constantly drunk all the time. Like that's his character trait, is that he's drunk. And there's this one episode where him and Homer are competing to be astronauts. And so Barney like cleans up his act. He hasn't had a touch of alcohol for and in like cartoon fashion, his hair has grown back and he's in great shape and blah, blah, blah. And so they announce to the two of them, like, listen, Barney won. But we're going to have a congratulatory sip of champagne. And Barney takes one sip and immediately like goes nuts.
Turns into Barney.
And as he flies off in a jetpack, one of the scientists goes, I don't understand. That was non-alcoholic champagne. And I think while that's a funny joke, at the same time, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there was someone like a Barney who is constantly, even just the idea of drinking is the thing that can set him psychologically off on this other thing. All he needed to do in that moment was think he was getting alcohol, but he was already so deep into his disease, right? So I'm parsing apart a Simpsons gag, but at the same time, I bet there's some actual connection on some level. Like I could see someone who's an alcoholic.
Triggers is what you're talking about.
There you go, trigger.
That's the word. It's people get triggered. And I tell them, if you get triggered, you might have a different response to it. I tell them always put it on a scale of 1 to 10. What's your response to what is it? A 1 trigger? Is it a 2 trigger? Is it a 5 trigger? Which one's the most dangerous? All of them, because they can add up. A beer truck drives by. Why do you think it has the paint on it like it does? I know, like as an alcoholic, I look at those signs differently on the freeway. Christmas sign with the bottle wrapped up with the ribbon and all that. It looks really nice. It's Christmassy, and all that. But I'm thinking, I'm looking at that bottle longer than they are around me. I know that.
Oh, yeah.
So they're not even noticing it. I'm like, I'll do that. Beer truck comes by and,
I work in advertising, and that is like a constant ethical dilemma that a lot of people in marketing in general just run into. Now, luckily, we don't have any clients that would have any product that's addictive. So I can feel comfortable saying this, but yeah, like, a beer truck that's been painted to look like it is a beer can fresh out the cooler with, droplets of dew on the outside of it. And it looks really refreshing. And there might be a sexy man or woman in like a bathing suit that's like drinking it or next to it. And the whole idea is to get you to get triggered in your mind for a desire, like, oh, that would be awesome to crush a brewski right now.
Yeah, girls playing volleyball on the beach.
Right. So there were, no matter what, whether you're addicted or not, our job is to trigger an emotional reaction in you that will hopefully get you to do a thing.
Right.
That if you are addicted is completely against your better needs.
Well, it's an ethical dilemma. You're right. It is. And it's like, how much do we advertise to these people? But at the same time, it's not so much the advertising. I look at all of it. I look at liquor licenses. How many liquor stores are there in one street in Huntington Beach had 53 liquor stores on one street. It's a main street, but guess what? They have 53. That's 53 liquor licenses, and that's not the whole city. But it's like people want to drink, people like to drink, people like to have a good time drinking. Now they have rules in Huntington Beach where you can't drink on the beach, no alcohol on the beach whatsoever. And that gets broken every 4th of July. You can bet, but they'll bust people for having alcohol or being drunk down there. They'll take them to jail. And just on the other side of the street, there's about 20 bars where you can get lit up and just walk to the beach, and so it's like they don't want people bringing booze to the beach because they want people to buy the booze at the beach, and then they want to arrest them at the beach if they're black.
There is this bizarre set of the commercial culture where they are trying to stay one step ahead of every security guard, every venue policy. Like, listen, here's how you're going to sneak alcohol in here. We've built a tie that has a built-in flask. And so you can sneak it in and like, oh, this is something that you wear on your inner thigh so that if you're getting a pat down, they're not going to feel it.
Right.
I used to work at a country music festival, and the ingenious, there's no better word for it, the innovation that a couple of underage, like 18-year-olds come up with to sneak 4 or 5 beers or a bottle of something into the venue. One of them said, I have a hoodie that has a false pocket in the hood itself. So I can hide, like 4 cans of beer in there, and they're never going to touch your hood. They don't need to. A previous podcast guest wore this like funky mushroom hat into a music concert that I went to with him once. And he's like, yeah, I got a whole 12-pack up there. And, it's like, gosh, if you put this level of thinking into, solving the pothole crisis, maybe you could do it.
I mean, I know a lot of potheads, and suddenly they all become engineers when you need to smoke something in a hotel room in a different city, and you're like, okay,
is there a piece of fruit here?
We've got an apple, we've got a pack of cigarettes, we've got a water bottle. We could probably make something out of all of this.
Right.
And alcoholics don't do that, but they don't need to either, right?
No.
It's catered to them.
Alcoholics will be the first person to tell you products that are not labeled alcohol that have alcohol in them, though. They're the ones who know, like, oh, you got to buy this off-brand Listerine because if you drink enough of that, it'll get you smashed.
That's one of the things that alcohol totally has is you can establish brand loyalty in alcohol where you can't do that with other drugs yet.
Yeah.
Very easily yet. Pot you will pretty soon, but...
I'm surprised that the alcohol, I'm not surprised, I guess, that the alcohol industry in the United States isn't treated sort of like the cigarette industry, where it's required to, like, okay, you need to spend $20 million making posters we're going to hang up in every high school in America about the dangers of this. And, when you look at a pack of cigarettes, the Surgeon General warning is right on there. On alcohol bottles, it's buried down below. And even the way that it's allowed to be advertised, like it's been a long time since I've seen a billboard for Cools out there. But, like you said, every it's Christmas. It's not a holiday in America if there's not booze. So 4th of July, you're on the beach, you got your bottle. It's Labor Day, kick back, you deserve it. Enjoy your bottle. It's Thanksgiving. Oh, the family's getting together. Have that drink for just yourself.
Well, who I think we have to thank for that is my industry that I'm in right now.
The advertise. Oh, 100%.
It's the PRs that at the very least booze just from a PR level has had way better PR than any other intoxicant out there. I mean, that's been weed's problem in general, is that it's just had terrible PR because there were forces against it early on, way back in the day.
It got a bad review early.
Cigarettes were getting great reviews early, but then had terrible PR going forward. And so I think especially the liquor industry looked at the tobacco industry and said, okay, let's not do some of the missteps that they took. We don't necessarily need to, but no, you're totally right. And that's never going to change. There's a amazing Ken Burns documentary series about prohibition.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, required viewing for anyone interested in just the topic of either addiction or even just the country's relationship with alcohol.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until watching that I realized, okay, so interesting factoid about prohibition, its beginning and ending is very tied in with the women's suffrage movement. And with I forget the activist's name who was instrumental in both its prohibition and then the repeal of prohibition. And I guess at the time, a saloon was a place that men and hookers were allowed to be in.
Yeah.
And so women weren't allowed to go out to bars and stuff. So alcoholism was almost primarily a male 100%, right? So there was this period of time where to be married in America, there was a highly likelihood that you were married to someone who was working all day and then just going to the saloon,
right,
and then coming home and taking it out on you and the kids.
Uh-huh.
So there was this push to we need to stop that because there's this actual destruction happening to the family. But then what it ended up doing is it made all the places to get booze no longer have that gender norm.
My grandfather had a still in Southern Illinois. And he sold booze to Al Capone.
Oh, wow. Right. So like the black market just makes the desire for it just explode. And then after a while, then the same group sort of helped repeal prohibition.
Yeah, and the feds would come down and they'd take buckshot and shoot the still up, and they'd throw it in the river, and then they'd pull it out of the river with a tractor and chain, patch it up.
Oh, yeah.
Be back in business that night.
My grandmother in Kentucky has tons of stories about like all the moonshine distilleries just throughout the countryside. And like, we don't go over there because that's where distilleries happen. And we've talked about it on the podcast before. There's a whole process of like leaving like some money under a rock on like a stump on the edge of town and, come back an hour later and there'd be a jug of moonshine with twigs and stones in the base of it and stuff like that. Anyways, Ken Burns' documentary on Prohibition, check it out.
Really good stuff.
Really good.
He does good stuff.
Okay, this is a weird question, but do you think that you could walk out of this podcast studio and within an hour be able to connect with enough people that you could know exactly how Fargo is doing when it comes to like addiction and where we're sitting as far as like rampant drug use?
I could tour a city and tell you where it is.
Yeah.
I could tour a city and tell you kind of like what's going on over here and what's going on over here. Because cities are little tiny countries. Let's face it, they're just little tiny countries with different populations doing different things. And what we talked about earlier is energy finds energy. And people will migrate towards each other if that's what they're up to and that's what they're doing. In the olden days, there used to be junkies even had rules. You never shoot anybody up for the first time ever. That's the ethical, dilemma we face today. Is like nobody cares about that anymore. At least even back then, they didn't want them to be addicted. So I'm not going to give you something unless I'm selling you something. So but it's an industry, and people don't get that. Illicit drugs is an industry. Battling illicit drugs with the DEA, there's another industry. We're an industry-based country. So that's just how it works, is that everything is going to get mixed up in the industry, whatever it is. You want to prevent drug addiction and alcoholism, you're going to have to start educating them early. And that didn't start happening until the 80s. Starting educating children. So we're behind on informing people, and families about what it can and cannot do.
I'm always amazed when I think of, okay, so like in Tucker and I's generation, we were the first seatbelt as a rule generation. And now I don't get in a car without putting my seatbelt on. It's an instinct now.
Yeah, it feels weird to not have one on.
Yeah, 100%.
I feel like, I'm in danger all of a sudden.
And I just think if they can do that with seatbelts, and you know what they did with us is they told us like the statistics, they showed us some frightening imagery.
Yes.
And they had posters up in all the schools, and they let kids teach their parents about it in a way too, where it was like, buckle your seatbelt. Dad, buckle your seatbelt. Dad, buckle your seatbelt. And I'm always surprised. I'm like, I got feelings about the educational system in America already, but that's the starting point in where I think we can help battle some of these things. And we can't do it in a puritanical way of saying these things are evil.
No.
These things are dangerous.
Yeah, you want to get kids.
The same way lighting off a firecracker in your hand is dangerous.
Yes.
And you could do it 20 times without any injury, and then your pinky's blown off.
Yep.
And
if you want to guarantee your kid's going to try that, ban them from doing it. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, or tell them that this is just trust me. Trust me. You don't want this. Trust me.
What are the current stats, even generally, on, say, like tobacco usage in younger generations? Because specifically anti-tobacco messaging was something that I think we heard the most growing up. I mean, we were hearing, Just Say No, the DARE program. There was, and cigarettes and alcohol were always in that, but specifically the fight with big tobacco was very prominent. So I'm just curious.
It is dropped dramatically. And when I say dramatically, I mean, we're talking like it is apples and oranges compared to where it was in the 90s.
It has.
Which is amazing to me. But again, they no longer allow advertising for it.
Right.
And that I think was a huge aspect for it because, but also like when that industry started dwindling down, all of a sudden vaping becomes the next thing. And now they're dealing with vaping.
Was a part of the plan to begin with.
Right. They're like, well, when they shut this down, we're going to have this ready. And then, so if you think we shut down vaping and then we're good to go, they're like, nope. Now we've got, and bubble gum tobacco.
Well,
and how do we get the kiddies? Well, let's flavor it.
Right. Well, and like tobacco usage may be down, but weed usage is way up, and it's going to keep going up too. And like it hasn't been around we don't have the same amount of data as we do on cigarettes, so we're still at that phase of finding out new long-term effects that we were never aware of. But certainly, just all the dangers from cigarette smoking of combusting something and inhaling it. If you're doing that all the time, you're just in danger regardless.
It's not good for you. It's not healthy. I smoked for number of years, and it's in my family, it's like the more you know about your family lineage and history and health history and things like that, there's things that, I shouldn't be here. I should be dead. That kind of stuff. But cigarettes have like 400 chemicals in them, in a cigarette. 400 chemicals.
I lost my grandfather to cigarettes because he was a lifelong smoker.
Yeah. But there's, chemicals in those things. And then, the vape thing, is not going to go over well because we don't know what the long-term effects are going to be. Nobody cares about long-term effects in industry. They care about short-term stock exchange stuff. That's what they care about first. It's not they're not looking at the human factor and how are we going to protect our humans? Well, some of them, like they'll accept that 14-15% that America may die from this. They accept it, and not that they're helping kill them, but they are, so it's a prohibition didn't work because people wanted to drink and they've drank for centuries, and the Revolutionary War got started because they held back the molasses that they made for rum. So it's like one of those things people just go, I don't have booze here. I may as well die. They made those kind of commitments early on in this country, about, when we established this country.
It always amazes me too when you hear about how like some municipality or state dealt with alcohol, a bunch of people who said like, well, what we're going to do is we're not going to have bars. It'll be a club. You have to pay to be a member of the club. And then you buy a bottle and it's kept behind a door and your waitress will, every time you need a drink, they'll go and they'll pour it from your bottle. And then you pay $1.50 for the mixer that it's going to go with. And that was Edie McClurg, who is in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. She was the car attendant lady. Done a bunch of great stuff. She was on a podcast where she was talking about, she's like, I worked at one of those clubs. And she goes, what you don't understand is they're tipping you like a penny every time because they're drinking their own booze and all you're doing is going to do. She's like, so you go in the back and the way you got back at someone who tipped you a penny is you took a swig out of their bottle. You never know. Or like you're the state of Utah, right? And they're like, well, you can have a beer at an Applebee's, but you have to buy an entree with it as well.
Oh yeah.
And just the way that they think like we're winning. And they're not winning.
No.
People are going to find ways and they're going to deal with it in some mentality.
It's always a loophole.
Yeah. Isn't that weird?
Yep.
Well, and I think too, there's something about, those who would like to enforce the specter of enforcement, the specter of keeping you safe. So like if, I don't know what it's like in Utah, but a state that says, well, it appeases a certain faction to make it look like we're doing something, but we're really just creating a little extra headache for you to still get your fix. Well, right. It just creates enough of we're doing something enough to have to not really do anything.
You're right. You have to go through more stuff to get what you want.
Right.
If you're an alcoholic in Utah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's true.
And it's not like the state of Utah doesn't have an alcoholic in there. There's plenty of them in there.
Right. And at that point, you then find out a new definition of entree, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, entrees are this mozzarella stick. This simple mozzarella stick is your entree. There you go. or the egg that's floating in the beer.
Yeah.
And Gary, this first of all, thank you very much for your time. We took more of it than we asked for, and I appreciate it. But there's we barely scratched the surface here, right? Like you've done a lot of interesting stuff in your life, and we talked mainly about addiction and stuff.
That's
but
okay.
I appreciate that because I think more people should talk about it. And
That's okay. It was my desire to become a counselor. It was the only thing I really wanted to do at that time that I ever wanted to do in my life. So I thought that was significant for me. That when I went through treatment, I want to do this. And that was the first time I ever said that in my life. And I followed through with it. So,
are you constantly reading?
No,
No.
not anymore. I've had too many strokes, so reading is not easy for me. But I used to read a lot of books and a lot of stuff, but not anymore.
Wow. See, we didn't even talk about strokes. Look
That's
at
all
that.
right.
Holy moly. Gary, thank you so much. And
Thank you for having me.
Welcome back to Fargo. It's changed just a little bit. And, the hospital you were born in, do you know what has happened to it since?
I'm thinking demolished.
Nope. It's still there. It's called Prairie St. John's now, and it is for addiction counseling. I'm not even kidding you. Yeah. Can you believe that? Yeah. It is. And it is one of the premier spaces in the state.
That is so amazing.
Yeah. It's I do a thing called crisis intervention training with police, and it deals with people who are depressed, who are bipolar, schizophrenic. And so I I try and manifest those symptoms in a way, and they're not about diagnosing, but sort of the idea that this person deserves more time.
Yeah.
Don't cuff them and stuff them. Let's find out what's going on. Why today? What's going on? And it's building that, that bridge of empathy with that human being. And I've done it now in other communities in South Dakota and Minnesota and Iowa. And when I tell them about in Fargo, we've got this resource and this resource and this resource, and their jaws drop. And they said, if we brought somebody in who was suicidal, the closest thing that we could do is drive them 4 hours in a paddy wagon and put them under a psych hold in a city that they have no connection to and no people in. And guess what? When the cycle hold's done, now you got to figure out how to get back to where you were.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't have good plans when it comes to mental illness in this country.
No, not at all.
You know, we don't have good plans. We don't have safe plans. We have improper police training. People with mental illness get shot by police every day, and people don't realize it. Every day, in America, that happens. You only see the clips of like when it becomes big news. And that's how the news works too. And that's sometimes how the media works too, is like, if it's a big news, then we'll take it.
Right.
If it's not big news, then we'll not take it. But it happens every day in America.
And I feel like it becomes big news when it's a well-to-do suburban individual who, had a freak out in a grocery store and, was shot in that situation. You're like, yeah, but what about the 70 other people who something similar happened? They were just in a different socioeconomic state.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been known to call news when they're on the air and tell them that what they just said is they're full of shit. And
That's awesome.
I've actually messaged them on Facebook and actually told this one guy, because they had a police chase in LA and it was, they were talking about the suspect. I finally said, you know what? That person might have mental illness. You guys need to shut the fuck up and stop just assuming that this is a bad person that did a bad thing, and I watched them on their computers and their faces changed, literally changed. They went, and then they started talking about mental illness. This person could be mentally ill. And I'm like, at least I got through to him.
Yeah, right.
Can't get through to him anymore, though. They blocked me, man. But thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hey, this was a ton of fun. And you'll be able to hear Gary in an upcoming episode of the Kepler radio play series that Kevin Kennedy and I are doing. He plays one of the founding brothers of Kepler, North Dakota, and we just recorded those pieces yesterday, and they're pretty dang good.
But before we sign off today, though, for anyone who's listening, someone out there who's listening is either dealing with addiction themselves, or it's in their family, or it's touched their lives in some way. Are there just some resources right now that you know of, websites or organizations that people should maybe take a look at to get more information on this topic?
People can get caught up in the treatment industry also, right? Because that's part of it, and everybody, they used to say, I owned my own treatment center for 8 years, and they used to go, "Are you as good as Betty Ford?" And I'd say, "Better." And they'd go, "How can you stake that claim?" I said, I don't stake that claim. Everybody stakes that claim.
Mm-hmm. So let's say the person then is either they are in the throes of addiction or it's touched their lives and they haven't taken that first next step to try to do anything. I mean, what is the next step? Is it just who do you talk to? How do you begin that process?
The first thing is, like I said before, addiction's physical. Usually people sometimes have to be pulled out of it, and they have interventions, and that's gotten popular on TV and things like that. But you're talking about the addict or the alcoholic that's isolated out there and is stuck.
Right.
And my thoughts are, be fearless. Go find out how to get well. Make it a quest, make it a vision. You have to start somewhere. And I tell people that's the first part of your process, is admitting that, this is bigger than I am. And I got guys who have started billion-dollar corporations that can't handle that fact, that this is bigger than I am. I've conquered everything. I set up this whole billion-dollar company and da-da-da, but I can't do this. Mm-hmm. I can't stop doing this. And then they end up in treatment. But for that isolated addict or alcoholic that's out there, just talk about it. Talk about it. Talk about what you really want. Talk about what you thought you were going to do, but it ended up this way. Talk about what direction do you want to go in life. Those are things that, but that's the other part that's hard, is that they're only going to hear my message if they're sober enough to hear it, because you can't talk to alcohol. You can't talk to heroin, you can't. Or fentanyl. You can't talk to fentanyl. You're talking to a drug. Right. So it's one of those things where hopefully they're sober enough to hear the podcast and they do something about it. The sooner they do something about it, the better off they're going to be. The longer people stay in it and the older they get, the harder it is to get free from it.
That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information. I'm a card-carrying member of Blockbuster, but there's only one left.